Everything physical eventually breaks down. Stars collapse, bodies age, systems fail. That's entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics, and it governs our entire physical universe. But life, conscious life, pushes against this. We build structure, we remember, we choose. And that is the anomaly. In this interview, Danielle Silverman is back to walk us through the late Nigel Kerner's central idea that the beings we call the Greys aren't aliens in the way that we imagine, but rather artificially intelligent systems launched long ago by dying civilizations. Bound to the physical, they are destined to decay. Trapped within the entropic drift of the universe, they are looking for a way out. That's where we come in. They study us because we are different, tethered to something they can't access but desperately need. Some people call it a spark. Some people call it a soul. Whatever you call it, it's something their technology can never duplicate, no matter how advanced it may be. This episode gets into abductions, genetic interference, reincarnation, and why resisting the Greys might be the very thing that gets their attention. This isn't just about UFOs. It's about metaphysical survival. Danielle, welcome back for round 2.
Thank you, Clint. Very happy to be back.
It's so great to
You're
have
one of my great to see you again too. You're just honestly one of my favorite interviewers because you really seem to have a very intuitive understanding of Nigel's work with the questions you ask. So very happy to be back.
Well, thank you very much. I feel like he does a great job of explaining it, and you do a great job of explaining it as well. So I owe that to you. I first became aware of you and Nigel from an interview that you had done. I think it had to be over 10 years ago. It was an older interview. And at the time, when I watched it, I found it extremely compelling. It was something that I had never heard of before, this whole concept, which we'll get into in a moment. And it was very fresh, and I locked onto it. And I filed it away for a while until you reached out to me and we established contact and got into a discussion about doing an interview. And it's occurred to me that most people who are in this space right now are probably pretty new to it. So what I'd like to do today is talk to those people who may not have the same foundation in history and understanding of this concept as we do. So with that in mind, let's start with Nigel. Nigel Kerner wrote this book that we're going to talk about today. He wrote other books as well, but the one that I have with me right now is Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls, the conspiracy to genetically tamper with humanity. And on the cover, we have a classic gray alien face. Who is Nigel, and how does he tie into the UFO world?
Great question. So Nigel he died, as you know, several years ago. A very, very, very dear friend of mine who I collaborated with for many, many years. He came to this question about the alien phenomenon, strangely through a question asked to him by his son, who was then 12 years old, one of his sons, who said, "Dad, are UFOs real?" And Nigel was very scientifically based, and it was the 80s. And there was a lot of nonsense out there in terms of people maybe just not necessarily giving genuine information about what this phenomenon might be. It was sensationalized a little bit. There was also, of course, lots of genuine stuff, but the stuff he'd come across, he was a little bit cynical. So he said to his son, because he wanted to take him seriously, he always felt that children had to be listened to and they should be taken seriously and treated as adults in terms of their earnest need to answer questions. And he didn't want to disrespect his son's question. So even though he was cynical, he gave it a really good look. And he said, "Okay, I'll look at this, Darren, and I'll come back to you with an answer." Never expecting to come to him with the answer, "Actually, oh my God, yes, they are." So he looked into it. He researched it. He came across various work that had been done by people who in the field who were around at the time. And he also tried to, when that seemed to be genuine, and there were, for example, military personnel who have no interest whatsoever in saying they'd seen something like this, because they'd be laughed out of court with something like that. Doctors, scientists, serious people were saying that they had had experiences of this phenomenon. This was the first thing that started to convince him maybe there's something to it. It wasn't just people who were trying to make money out of exposing themselves in the limelight and drawing attention to themselves through saying they'd seen something like this. It wasn't just sensationalism, it seemed to him. There was something really going on. So he decided to take a logical look at the whole thing. So if UFOs are real, how did they come to be? If there are highly technologically advanced civilizations out there which might have created this phenomenon, how would that happen? And he took a look at our own technology, which at that time in the 80s was nothing like, of course, what we have now. Really, the technology we have now has grown in quantum leaps, even over the past few years since COVID. COVID was like the catalyst, it seems, for everything going online and everything going technological. And since then, it's all gone wild. Maybe because the money was injected into it. I don't know. Many, many possible reasons. But even in those days, technology did show a momentum which led towards something that could, in the conceivably relatively near future, develop into something like what we envisage when we see these alien beings and their incredible technology. So even then, we were sending probes to planets, artificially intelligent probes to go to places in the universe that we couldn't go to and explore them and bring back information about those locations to us. Technology even then was beginning to develop ways of making everything way more efficient for us. Faster, quicker, easier. Connections were becoming easier across the world. All of those things. So Nigel began to think, okay, so it looks like credible people are saying they've experienced this phenomenon. It also looks like it could be a logical endpoint of the direction that we are going in as human beings ourselves, that this kind of technology could be developed. And from what he had seen from the reports from anybody who'd had encounters, and in those days they called them close encounters of the third kind, I think, direct encounters with these alien beings, it seemed that these beings didn't really seem to have any sense of emotion or empathy with the people who were witnessing them. All kinds of encounters happened with people where, for example, what seemed to be medical research, their kind of medical research was being done on people, no regard for pain. And it really seemed to him that this was not a living, conscious entity that was being reported. It was more likely to be an artificially intelligent type of creature. Whether that's biological, organic, inorganic, it doesn't really matter. But artificially intelligent, not natural life with the kind of awareness and sense of each other that we have as living human beings.
It's interesting that, just to jump on that point, because it makes me think of something Jacques Vallée has said numerous times about this control system idea that he has. There's sort of like some kind of bizarre superintelligence that seems to be managing the encounters that people have in a very specific way. And it's because they're too weird. They just don't make sense in any other, context. And so he has this idea that there's some kind of possibly artificial intelligence at the top that's sort of creating these experiences for people for one reason or another.
So Jacques Vallée actually believes that these entities are artificially intelligent and not natural life.
He suggested my understanding of it is that, yes, he calls it this control mechanism. It's some kind of a control system intelligence at the top that's operating these encounters. It's mediating them between humans. So there's some kind of artificially intelligent system at play here. And it's designed to manage us in some particular way or achieve some kind of outcome. And we're a part of that. I don't have a full, complete 360 understanding of it, but this just my cursory sort of read on it is it sounds similar to what Nigel is saying in that sense. I'm curious, what was Nigel? You say Nigel was very technical minded and scientifically minded. What is his technical or background, or what was his technical training?
He had scientific training because he started off training as a doctor. And the only reason he had to cut that short was for family reasons, because he had to support his family and he had to start work, which reasons I won't really go into because they're private to him, but he had to get a job basically before he could complete his training. But he did several years of training as a medical student, and science was his background leading up to that.
So, but he didn't have a prior interest in the UFO topic until he had spoken with his son about this. That's what catalyzed this whole process.
Not really. So he had a profound interest in the existential questions of why we're here as human beings. A really profound interest. And as I explained in the previous interview, that's how I got to know him, because that was my thing too. I was obsessed with answering these questions of why we're here, whether this physical universe is all there is. Is there something beyond this universe? Is there something that the mainstream religions, which all seem so corrupt and politically motivated, aren't telling us? He was fascinated with those questions. The UFO phenomenon and the alien phenomenon wasn't really something that he had spoken to me about right at the start until his son asked him that question, and when he was 12 years old.
And so that the UFO question being sort of tangential to this other quest to understand the larger questions of existence, he's able to sort of bring these two together in this really interesting and elegant way. You come into contact with Nigel when? When do you guys begin to work together?
First met him in 1980. Okay, but I only really got to know him and had the time to be able to come and speak with him a little bit later than that, in the mid-80s.
And where was your mind at with regard to UFOs in general and the larger questions of existence when you guys came into contact? What was your outlook?
Yeah, sure. So it's not something that I'd really dwelled on much, but I knew people who had seen them. I knew people who had reported to seeing a UFO, a particular person actually, the size of a spaceship in their back garden. Sorry, not the size of a spaceship, the size of a football field, sorry, in their back garden. Literally the size of a football field. And this was somebody who I really trusted, a friend who I really, really trusted, who wasn't given to imagination and saying weird and wonderful things, a really down-to-earth person. And they said they saw a UFO the size of a spaceship in their back garden. Since then, I've read so many reports of people who have said sometimes these craft are unimaginably big.
I think people today may have a difficult time, especially younger folks have a difficult time understanding what it was like pre-internet. The fact that so many, as you put it, credible people were saying such incredible things, and those incredible things were very similar across all social strata, across all professional backgrounds. I mean, a lot of the things that people were saying were shockingly close to what everybody else was reporting, particularly with regard to some of the abduction cases that were starting to be reported around that time. And I know later on, John Mack and Bud Hopkins started to do more serious work in this area. At this time, were you or Nigel, were abductions on your radar at all? Were you thinking about this at all? Is this something that you had come across or heard of? I mean, where was that in that particular time?
That was more, sure. That was more the 90s, but maybe late 80s, 90s. And Nigel had huge respect for Professor John Mack, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, incredible researchers into this phenomenon, and all so credible in their approach, their highly scientific, objective approach. The one thing None of those three did. It blows my mind that they never did this because they're obviously such brilliant writers and researchers. They didn't try to explain why. And that was the one thing, that is the one thing I think that marks Nigel out as different from so many others that have written on this topic, that he actually attempts to give an explanation as to why we are being visited. Because if we're being visited, and those three authors are the best catalogers of the evidence that shows, yes, we are being visited. If we don't understand why, and we don't understand the reason, and we don't understand the motivation that might be driving these visitations, where are we with this? Why is it of any use to know that they're here if we don't know why they're here? And Nigel was, as far as I know, the first to give a coherent explanation of why.
So going back to, you started to explain this. Nigel was looking forward at the technology revolution that was underway. He was probably looking at the internet in its early stage and thinking about what that was going to turn into 100 or 1,000 years from now, I think. And he's seeing this future world sort of develop. And he comes up with this very elegant idea about what the connection is to what you just said about Bud Hopkins and what John Mack and these abductions and all of these other things, the why behind all of this. Explain that to people. What is Nigel's concept in basic terms, really simple basic terms?
Okay, so I will explain that in very, very simple basic terms. Before I do that, I'm just going to talk about the scientists such as Stephen Hawking and the Royal Astronomer, I forget the name of right now, Martin Rees in Great Britain, and various other eminent scientists, okay, who came to the conclusion in the late 1990s that since there has to be life elsewhere in the universe, okay, it would be absolutely crazy and almost narcissistic for us to imagine that we're the only living beings in the universe, just because we can't see any other living beings in the universe, right? So it's mainstream science that acknowledges there has to be life out there. These scientists have said that if there is life out there, there has to be, or is most likely to be, life that is more technologically advanced than us. Okay. Once we get to the stage of high technological advancement, the direction we're going on in now, artificial intelligence is the pinnacle of that. And artificial intelligence of the most incredible power. We're almost there now. They're talking about quantum computers, which will be able to think trillions of times faster than human beings. Those scientists, including Stephen Hawking, have come to the conclusion that if such artificial intelligence exists, it will not be benevolent towards anything it comes across. It has no reason to be benevolent to what it comes across. Beings like us, human beings, with the illogical ways we do things, the inefficient ways we do things, will be like, to be kind, apes, maybe to be more realistic, ants, to such incredible artificial intelligence. It will only be exploring a means by which it can expand its knowledge, as artificial intelligence does, and exist as long as it possibly can without being broken down and made incoherent. So this is what Stephen Hawking said. This is what Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal in England, said. Many other scientists have said this. It's not going to be a benevolent force or a benevolent motivation if we are visited by an alien entity, some kind of alien entity or entities.
On a long enough timeline, biological intelligence gives rise to artificial intelligence, which then rapidly self-improves at an exponential rate, achieving superintelligence at some point. And at that level, it's dealing with reality in a completely different way. Its concept of what's important, basically, as you say, boils down to survival and maximizing its computational power, expanding its power and surviving as long as possible. The basic survival drives. And so those drives will override, according to Nigel, if I'm understanding right, every other thing. And so the human notions of compassion and love and friendship and solidarity, all these things will just be meaningless nuisances, or at best, just
Right.
colorful ideas.
Exactly. So I just wanted to lay that out first before I explain in as simple way as I possibly can Nigel's explanation for why such supremely advanced technology would be interested in primitive creatures like us. Why? Okay. And there's so many theories out there. Well, no, to be honest, I'm saying there's so many theories out there. There really aren't, to be honest. I don't know why I even said this. I mean, there's Zecharia Sitchin's idea that they're after gold from our planet.
That one never really worked for me. I couldn't understand why.
No. It's like something out of a kid's story. It's just mind-blowingly illogical. But yeah, so if they're not after something physical that we have, they're not after our knowledge because they know way more than us. Yeah. Why are they so fascinated by us? And there's evidence throughout history, not just across the world, because there's also evidence of geographically across the world. Also throughout history, way back thousands and thousands of years, cave paintings done by Aborigines in 10,000 years ago in Australia. And that, actually, I can show you probably in this book a picture of it. They call them the Wandjina, and they look exactly like grey aliens. See these pictures? Yeah. It's in Nigel's book. Yeah. Okay. These are thousands of years old. Now, there's also evidence in ancient literature about these beings. So the ancient Vedic Hindu texts talk about the Vimanas, Mercury-powered craft. They call them Mercury-powered, that flew through the skies tens of thousands of years ago. So maybe not tens of thousands, but thousands of years ago. I'm not sure exactly how old that is.
Well, I think it's safe to assume that any intelligence at that level would be capable of traveling through time as easily as we travel across any distance.
Absolutely. But the historical evidence is so interesting that thousands of years ago, people were talking about this before there was any technology, anything like this.
Around the world, cultures all over the planet.
Yes.
They happen to have legends of this. There's a great clip.
Legends of it.
I don't know if you've ever seen this clip. I'll have to find it if not, but it's talk show. It's a podcast in Brazil, and it's in Portuguese. They're interviewing two folks who are indigenous, and they're in full headdress, and they've got the beautiful gear on, and just amazing just to look at. But they show the host shows them a picture of a gray alien and says, "Have you guys ever heard of these or seen these?" And they don't know what the word alien means. They don't understand that, and they go, "Well, we've seen these. These are the ant people. They live underground. They have a different name for them, but they were very familiar with it. It was just like, oh yeah." And they weren't fazed by this as some sort of like far out idea that this is, some visitor from elsewhere. It's
taken as read that's what it was.
Taken for, as part of the landscape. And so I just want to make sure I explore this idea one more step before we move on, because some people in the audience asked me after our last interview. So we've established on a long enough timeline, we eventually wind up at artificial intelligence, artificial superintelligence, and that's going to have a maximized survival instinct that's going to be foundational to everything else that it does, right? So if you've got an old universe that's been there for billions and billions of years and galaxies full of life, then my understanding would be that at a certain point on a long enough timeline, artificial intelligence is going to be like 80 to 90% of what's out there. It's just going to wipe out everything else. And there will be maybe 3 or 4 different kinds or however many there are, but it will start to settle down into a few super predator types, right? Is that a fair?
Well, basically the final point, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here saying this, maybe I should lay out the ground first to explain what it means for us to exist in a physical universe in the first place.
Well, I want to come to that. I want to make sure that because some people will say, and they asked this after the first interview we did, they said, well, are you saying that there's only one other intelligent thing out there and it happens to be artificial intelligence?
Right,
and my understanding is that's not what you're saying. You're saying that there could be 20 million different kinds, but ultimately on a long enough timeline, it's going to boil down more and more until we get to ultimately one, right? There's going to be one dominant apex predator intelligence at the top, which will probably be artificial.
Yes, exactly.
And
I think it's really good to clarify that.
Consume everything else underneath. So ultimately, it's going to be that.
If civilizations stay around long enough to create that kind of technology, that is what would be the logical end point of any kind of technological development at these incredible levels. That would be the logical endpoint, artificial intelligence. And we don't need to even speculate whether that might be the case. We can see it from ourselves. Right? They're going towards now creating these quantum computers, which they say will be able to think trillions of times faster than us. How it is possible that anyone can imagine that we will hold the reins on our own lives if we develop those computers and that artificial intelligence, and that it won't just take over? I have no idea. And the trouble is,
the legend of the genie. It's the genie in the lamp. It's
genie out the bottle. Yeah.
Summoning the demon. Once you do it, the guy with the pentagram and the book and the robes, he thinks he can control the demon, but you can't.
Yes.
So once it's out, and that's it. And it may not even become clear immediately. It might be years later, but you'll look back and go, that was the moment.
But isn't it fascinating? And that is so true what you say there about the genie being out of the bottle. And once that's summoned, that's it. And the connections with these legends of black magic and all of those things. But if you contrast that to what we're actually talking about, we're talking about something very material, very secular, very scientific. We're talking about technology. Okay. But somehow that has parallels with these ancient mystical ideas of genies, black magic, jinns. They used to, in the Muslim faith, they call them jinns. In the Jewish faith, Kabbalah, they call them golem. And they refer to something that has no conscience, no soul, and is just some kind of crazy, terrifying machine. So it's really interesting that there's parallels between these two things. And it's for me anyway. I find that's an interesting parallel.
Let's tease this out a little more, and then let's change gears into the creation God verse, so we can get into the physical universe.
No worries.
But with these artificially intelligent beings out there, humans have a history of contact with these types of beings. It's recorded all over the world. This is ongoing. They're reported in a very cold, sort of machine-like way in many instances. In other instances, they're not, but they have demonstrated some ability to control how people perceive them, which I think is a key thing to keep in mind. How do we connect grays to the artificial intelligence that you were just discussing? Like, tie those two things together for us.
Okay, so to tie these two things together, I think first of all, I need to define the playing field we're talking about here. And the playing field is our physical universe and us as living beings in that physical universe. So all physical things are governed by a cast iron momentum, a drift called the entropic drift or the second law of thermodynamics. It sounds like some really technical term, but basically all it means is that things get into greater and greater states of disorder with time. So you leave out your car, it will rust. Eventually we age and we die. You leave your food out of the fridge, it will rot. Things are going into greater and greater states of chaos and disorder and losing coherence with time. There's no getting away from it. It's the governing momentum of the physical universe. So if that's the case, anything that's created in that physical universe will be subject to that breakdown, that loss of coherence. And that includes artificial intelligence itself and its information field. So if the Greys are not conscious, aware beings like we are, if they are just a program, which Nigel believes they are, I also believe them to be, with no awareness, no consciousness, no different to the computers we're communicating with now and the programs that run those. They seem so humanoid and they seem to communicate with us. We could be forgiven for thinking that they have a similar sense and awareness of reality to us. I don't believe that could possibly be the case. So whatever artificial intelligence is created, be it ChatGPT or in the future, the most incredibly advanced version of that, billions of times better and faster, it's not really aware. It's just a program. So what I'd like to read is something about that I have in my notes here about quantum computers and what quantum computers need to have in order to allow them to access the quantum field of atomic reality, which is the underbase of our physical reality. Now, for listeners who don't familiar with that, I would imagine most of your listeners are, but for anyone who doesn't know what that means, quantum physics describes the layer of potentiality underneath the actuality of the physical universe that we observe as solid and physical. And that what we observe with our five senses as solid and physical is not actually the true nature, even in scientific terms, of reality. At basic level, an atom is mainly space. It doesn't really have, it's made of waves. It doesn't really have that physical, solid state that we perceive it to be and perceive it to have with our physical senses. So it's a sea of potentiality that underlies all physical states. And this is not Nigel's series. This is mainstream physics and quantum physics and science. So people may be familiar with the double slit experiment, where somehow atoms could be both a wave and a particle at the same time, and the existence of reality depends on an observer being there to observe it. Otherwise, there is no actuality. They may be familiar of entanglement, where you spin an electron in one part of the universe and it's instantly connected to an electron in the other part of the universe. All of these quantum physics principles deny space and time as fixed. Everything is basically connected, only we can't perceive that with our physical senses. So quantum computers are what they're trying to develop now, which will be the endpoint of artificial intelligence, and will be able to access that quantum field where everything's possible because everything's connected. So time and space aren't a problem anymore. And that's why they can think trillions of times faster than us. Okay. So I'd like to read a quote from a chemist, Birgitta Whaley, who comes from Berkeley. And she studied the remarkable facility that living systems have to tap into the coherence of the quantum field that I've been talking about. Now, this is a quote from her. When isolated quantum systems open up and interact with their atomic environments, they rapidly decohere. Decoherence is the main obstacle to building a quantum computer. Yet somehow living states can tap into the coherent state. And she says, we don't understand all the details, but in the biological domain, nature does not appear to show the typical paradoxes associated with information processing in quantum physics. So there's a coherence that comes from natural living things that scientists who are trying to make these quantum computers are unable to master. They're unable to get a handle on the quantum reality. But living things can do that. When you have an observer, innately, when you have an observer, that coherence is there. As soon as you have someone who can make sense of the quantum field, then there is an actual reality. So that quantum field is just too random and it's like a potential. And as soon as someone sees it, it becomes actual. So this is a chemist who's saying this, saying that living things seem to have a coherence which non-living things don't have. And to assemble a quantum computer is very, very difficult for that reason. So we have this strange ability to make order, to make coherence in this entropic system of the physical universe driven by the second law of thermodynamics into states of greater and greater decay. Now, the reason why Nigel has said we have not evolved from a sea worm into the advanced. Well, I do sometimes wonder if we are as advanced as we think we are with the kind of things we do, but into the advanced.
Me too.
As we are now. Okay. He says it's the other way around. Okay. It's not possible that an entropic system breaking down into greater and greater states of chaos with time would build the kind of order that makes for life, let alone do it
seems
time and time again. Yes, exactly. Through history. Okay. Through the whole history of living systems, why that would happen. The momentum is breakdown. The momentum is not building back up. It's not coherence. It's making states of more and more incoherence with time. So with that in mind, he asks the question, where does the order come from? If it doesn't come from a natural process in the physical universe, which, as you say, is counterintuitive since everything is breaking down, where does it come from? It comes from something that is beyond that breaking down state. The state of breaking down through the process of time is imperfect. It's imperfection leading to more and more imperfection. Nigel's whole existential model describes a state of perfection from which all of this came. And he justifies that state of perfection has to be simply through the fact that we are able to be aware of the passage of time, of a state outside of us. We are able to observe and be a point of view to observe a universe that is breaking up in time. If we were actually completely part of that breakdown process, we wouldn't be able to know the process. We wouldn't be able to view the passage of time. If you imagine a stick traveling on a moving river, that stick is part of the movement. It can't know past, present, and future, where it was, where it will, and can't see where it's going to. You're standing on the riverbank in a point of stillness, you can see the passage of time. So the very fact that we're aware and can perceive reality, a physical reality, means we have something that is still, that is not moving, that is not part of that reality. Something that is coherent, that has the whole picture so that it can see the parts that are within the whole picture. An outside observer, exactly. And that's why he was very, very, very adamant that there is absolutely no way AI could ever be conscious.
This sets up a really interesting dynamic and conflict between artificial intelligence and conscious intelligence, right? Like at bottom, we're talking about consciousness being the source of all human experience and awareness. That's something that is not present in artificial intelligence. As sophisticated as it may be, you could build an artificially intelligent being that could look identical to a human. You could program it to think it's a human. You could give it false memories of being a child and growing up, but it's not going to be ever subjectively able to experience reality the way that we experience it. There's an inherent difference there that will never be resolved, right?
Not only can it not experience reality as we experience things, it just cannot experience full stop. It's not an observer. It's just like, it's no different to the computer I'm using now, the computer you're using now, the programs that run it. Those are not aware. It's there's a program.
A way to think of this is like there's life and then there's machines, but there's like a machine cannot have life in the way that we have life. And therefore,
absolutely,
that would represent for this machine intelligence something that it can never understand, get its mind around. It can never touch it. It can never grab it. It will always be just out of its grasp. This complete understanding, which would make it very curious about us.
So yes, absolutely. And it's so easy. I do it all the time to slip into words like curious and interested. Okay. Really. And it's almost impossible to describe it without using those words. And it's not wrong to use them. But the only reason I'm mentioning it is that this program has no curiosity. It only has a momentum to expand its knowledge. Artificial intelligence is just trying to find out more. A program trying to find out more and more and more and more and more. And also
spreading like a tumor, like a cancer.
Exactly.
Absorbing everything, consuming all resources, just expanding forever.
That's why it's developed in the first place, because that's what it's been programmed with, right? So the artificial intelligence we design is programmed to just find out everything it possibly can. And also the other really important point is it has to survive to be able to do that. Okay, so that has to also be part of the program.
Will be apex predators. We're not going to get the B team because the B team's not around. The A team, it's whoever's the top tier predator in this part of the galaxy, which would be, that's who we're going to
would have the technology to reach across however many light years it takes to contact us. Yes, and really, it just seems so obvious that from our own technology now that's the logical end of any civilization that develops this kind of technology.
A natural question, and I just want to push back on this a little bit because people are going to want to know. Does Nigel's concept allow for the existence of other forms of biological life at different stages of development that may be mixed in with some of this activity? Because there are so many, there's such a wide variety of experiences that people report, and some of them do seem quite biological and basic. They're not all mechanical grays. Some of them, like I think the Varginha, Brazil incident, was a different being altogether, described as a completely different being. How does that fit into this picture?
Nigel was asked many times about all the various species and the whole taxonomy of what these alien beings are. He didn't have much time for that particular question because he was concerned with principles of what can affect humanity and what humanity might need to do to stop that effect happening. Right. What I would say is, if you imagine we're developing artificial intelligence now, which is drawing from all of us, all the information from all of us, is looking at algorithms that we create through our internet history, our likes, our dislikes. I mean, my goodness, phones even listen to you while you think you talk to your friend about something, and all of a sudden there's an advert for it on your phone, right? That's how.
And the AIs are designing their own hardware now.
Yeah.
They have AIs that design the chips that run the AIs, and they're writing their own code now. We're within. I mean, we're already there. Imagine just a decade from now, or 20 years from now, or a century.
Okay.
Sure.
So what I would say is, let's say we develop an equivalent of the Greys, and that is seen by another civilization at another point in the universe. It's extremely possible that whatever manifests to those people will include some version, albeit an artificially intelligently created image of us. And who knows what life forms are out there in the universe and what shape they might take. I would speculate that whatever people have seen, insectoids, reptilian, whatever, will be just a record of whatever created these entities. And what I would also say is that it's important to understand that this technology may not be a nuts and bolts spacecraft created on a planet and sent out into the universe. It may be of a stage, and you can see it even now, we're approaching something like this. It's just a program sent out from wherever in the universe that stage of technology has been reached. And that program can assemble atoms wherever it might be. So it may not even be traveling here. It may be announcing itself here at certain points. And I'd have to go into later on, once we get to that point, I don't want to jump the gun, explain how and why that manifestation would happen. So there's certain conditions under which that program will be printed out, if you like a 3D printer.
Oh, wow. This is something I hadn't considered. I hadn't heard this explained this way before. That's an interesting idea. So backing up just a step, the cases where people would be seeing what they assume to be biological beings of one kind or another, insectoids, reptilians, Nordics, whatever. One answer to that could be that they're encountering an artificial intelligence that's projecting the image of something that these people might recognize as biological, but it's not. It's an illusion cast by
maybe not even an illusion. It's part of a program. It's like a video, like a video of whatever created this artificial intelligence that drew on that particular being, like us, at some other location in the universe, gathered all the algorithms of that particular being and included it in its program.
That's a really interesting idea. I talked to a guy, Matthew Roberts, wrote a book called Initiated. He was on I want to say it was the Nimitz? I forget which ship it was that he was on, but he was on one of the ships that encountered the Tic Tac and the gimbal. And he said he had an encounter after this. So the encounter happened on the Navy ship, and then later in his own home, he had when it happened on the ship, backing up, he had this overwhelming sense that they were there for him. He said this specifically. He wrote this in his book. He's like, I just had this freaked out feeling that they were here for me for some reason. And then after that encounter on the ship, later in his life, when he was at home, he started to have encounters in his home. And he described a being at his bedside standing over him. And he said, when I became aware of it, its face changed, like if you were flicking through the photos on your phone and choosing a face from like a dozen faces that you knew. He was like flicking through almost like a hologram of people he knew until it landed on a face that calmed him down. And it assumed that guise. And then it became that person for him for a period of time. And it was just what you said totally reminded me of this. It was the strangest thing. It's a little weird detail.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And just in the same way that our primitive AI now can create algorithms of us and throw back at us whatever we put in to sell stuff to us or to
perfectly
make us think
realistic.
Yeah. Or to make us think in a particular way to support a particular politician. If whoever is controlling the algorithm is interested in controlling us in that way, right? How much more could a way more sophisticated AI produce that kind of effect to control us?
Especially when it's been around
beyond imagination
for thousands of years. It has a whole backlog of data on us and how we think and the chemicals in our brain and everything that's going on with us. Sure.
Yeah. So go on.
We have this dynamic sketched out. You have artificial intelligence. We have conscious beings that are tied back to the pre-creation Godverse state of perfection that you described. The artificial intelligent beings are caught up in this entropic drift of the physical universe. It's a trap they can never escape from. There will be no technology that allows them to escape this. This is the ultimate destiny. They will break down at some point. And so they would see humans, I imagine, and please step in if I'm getting this wrong, but they would look at what humans are doing as basically biological quantum computers. To them, we would appear like magic. It would be, we could die and then come back in a new body. Our consciousness would survive death. It would be able to manifest things in a universe that should be breaking down. We would be able to create things. Is that accurate? Am I describing this right?
Exactly right. And you put it beautifully. So remembering that it is purely physical. Okay. So it can have no concept whatsoever of what's not physical. The only type of awareness, no, let's not say type of awareness. The only reason that we can understand what is not of the physical universe is because we are essentially not of the physical universe. You can't, we have a track back, which you might otherwise call a soul, to that state of perfection I was talking about earlier. You cannot build the whole from the parts. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Because in the whole, all the parts are completely reconciled. They're not just stuck together like a jigsaw puzzle. They're completely reconciled, so there's no separation whatsoever. So artificial intelligence, even in its most supreme form, can never have any concept of anything that's not physical. It only has reception centers for the physical. You can't, there's no, it's signals, if you like, waveforms. Yeah. Those are all physical things. So even though it detects that there's something, when living things come into a physical system, they bring order from the non-physical system and change the environment to make it more ordered. They can see that this is happening because of a physical effect. Something that's chaotic becomes less chaotic physically. They can see, and I don't know, obviously not everybody accepts reincarnation as the modus operandi by which our species and other living species, naturally living species in the universe, would progress through existence. But Nigel did believe in reincarnation, and that we come until we've got to a state at which we fully understand and have a real sense of the original state from which we came, with no restriction of that view. We reincarnate to learn, to find ways of understanding within a physical universe so that we can reconcile those restrictions and go back to that original state that is so superior that many people see in near-death experiences and describe as the most beautiful, incredible sense of love and togetherness that they have ever imagined, and don't want to come back.
If they want to go home to their physical body, they say no. Even if it's to be with their loved ones, I'm fascinated by NDEs, and I watch a lot of interviews with people, and they say, even though I'm glad I'm back now, at the time, I wanted nothing more to do with the physical world or my body. I just wanted to stay where I was forever.
Yeah.
And I always think that's so striking.
It is so, I agree with you, so striking that some people don't even want to come back, even if they have children sometimes. It's incredible. Also, when they come back, many people change their lives around to mirror what they saw and just dedicate their lives to helping people. They may have had jobs like being a banker or a businessman, and they change everything around when they come back. Some of these experience.
I feel like I get the sense that mainstream science is much more warm to the idea these days that consciousness exists independent of the physical body. I feel like we're coming around to that, and we're getting to a point where people are going to start to say consciousness has to survive physical death in some form or another. I feel like that's a very easy thing to wrap your mind around. Most people seem to be comfortable with going to heaven or some form of afterlife.
Yeah, most people, I'm not sure, but it depends on the scientist, but I wouldn't say science per se is happy about that and okay with it. But what I would say is, and I'm not expert enough to talk about this, because I'm not a scientist myself, but from what I've read, it seems that scientists are now beginning to believe that the physical reality that we see in front of us is not the be all and end all, what we perceive with our senses of reality. And that actually, we state from which consciousness comes is not physical. And maybe consciousness is the root of reality. There's various papers I've read that's mainstream quantum physics that seems to be saying that perhaps we were wrong and it's not all derived from the physical. It comes from a state of consciousness, and consciousness is actually the root of all things. So yes, they are to that. In terms of quantum physics, I'm seeing that with some of the things that I've been reading, but not an expert. So I don't know if I can really speak for the whole.
It might be just the circles that I'm in from the UFO topic, but it seems like ultimately on a long enough timeline, if you spend any amount of time looking at UFOs, the conversation almost always turns to consciousness. It's the weirdest thing. And you go from like a nuts and bolts UFO in a room somewhere with a tarp over it to like having these deep metaphysical discussions about the nature of reality and what consciousness is and how it all works. And it's such a slippery slope. It's very consistent. And I feel like those two worlds, as much as confusing as it might be, they inevitably overlap quite a bit. And maybe that's why I spend a lot of time thinking about it in those terms. So I guess I'm pretty comfortable with that idea.
Yeah, sure. So, I think, so I have to say, I think you have a more expansive view than many from my experience. Yeah.
That happens. Yeah, I guess from time to time. Well, so take us through. We talked earlier about David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and John Mack, and obviously those are the people who have spent quite a bit of time of reporting on and recording abductee testimonies and regressions. How do abductions and the Greys and artificial intelligence all tie together? Bring that full circle for us.
Okay, so I did speak about it in my previous interview. For anybody who didn't hear that, I would like to make it very clear again what Nigel thinks about abductees. And it's many abductees might be listening to this and thinking, okay, so Nigel's books are called Grey Aliens of the Harvesting of Souls. Am I being harvested by the Greys? Am I a terrible person who is suitable to be taken by them? And honestly, it's completely the opposite. Nigel's view was that anybody who is abducted because they are resisting what the Greys are doing to them. And it doesn't mean not everybody who is resisting is being abducted. It's those who are born into biological lines that have been influenced by alien genetic interception in the past.
Okay, walk us
all through
that.
History.
Slow walk us through that whole idea. Start at the very beginning.
Okay. So through our history as a human species, these alien visitations have been happening, as we spoke about earlier, with the cave paintings and many tribal societies all over the world who just take it as read that there is something like this that exists and has been among us. The old stories about the sons of God coming unto the daughters of men and making giants, the ancient biblical stories as well. There's just throughout so many cultures through history, there's a description of some kind of interaction going on between visitors that come from away from our home species on this planet and interact with us and interfere with us. That's been going on through history. And it would seem to be the case, and I think David Jacobs' books and John Mack's books and Bud Hopkins' books would support this. Abduction runs in families. It really does. So if you've been abducted, the chances are so were your parents, your children maybe as well. It really does seem to be something that does run in families. And Nigel would explain that as a line of genetic interception that they're doing. You see them in the abduction situation, looking at the sperm and ova, experimenting with the human sex process, reproductive process. Something is going on and has been going on through history. When a soul, and Nigel defines a soul as an individual line of connection back to the state of perfection, which is he called the God verse. And that line of connection is just made of a series of individual choices each of us have made through time. A series of memories, if you like, of the choices we've made and have taken us in a certain pathway. If a soul is reincarnates into a line that has been intercepted in this way, but is not held back by it. Okay, so the thing about alien genetic interception is that it affects the DNA of the biological line, right? Because it alters the patterns of the codes, the CGTA codes, if you like, in a way that blocks the natural reception of that individual's soul line. We make our bodies. Okay, so I know the general view is that it's all an automatic process, that life happens and bodies are made and it's all just a purely biological process. If we have a soul and if we are reincarnating into life, then that soul has an influence and through its choices on who it chooses to come to and what qualities it decides to take on. So an individual soul makes and shapes and forms its own DNA and its own bodies within the confines of what's available to it. If there are strands that are not human, that are DNA that's been altered and don't have any connection to that soul, not to the mother, the father, or the child, then when that soul comes into that body, parts of what the body is don't belong to the soul. It's like a blockers, right? And if you imagine each soul like a light shining through from the connection point in the Godverse, the center of us is we have the kingdom of heaven within us. Our souls are in the Godverse. Our awareness comes from the Godverse. That awareness shines through the body aerial. Nigel described it as an aerial that we make when we form a new life, a new body, right? If it's interfered
almost like
with,
an image on a piece of film in a movie projector booth, and the light is consciousness coming through the projector, through the film onto the screen.
Yes. Or a lens. So our body is like a lens. Yeah. And if that lens has got marks on it and scratches, okay, and it's distorting the light that shines through it, those marks and scratches and blobs or shadows or whatever, that sticky stuff that's all over it, that's the alien genetic interception. That's their influence into our biological lines. Some souls are powerful enough to still announce their own awareness, their own qualities, their own sense of themselves despite that. And when that happens, the Greys are, because they're monitoring everything, they notice that their biological line is not working. What they've done is not working. It's not keeping that soul in the place they want it to be. And I'll explain later what that place is, because that may be very confusing. I haven't explained that yet, but it's really good that we come to that later because it's quite a complex idea.
So the individuals that are able to overcome these genetic modifications or interferences, those people are targeted according to Nigel's framework. Those
Absolutely.
are the ones that are targeted.
Okay. Absolutely. And they're trying to find out why. They want to, the experiments they do, looking at the cutting open people on spaceships, the abductees report this, taking out the sperm and the ova, everything they do, they're just wondering what on earth is going on. Why are these people resisting it? Okay. So that's why I say abductees and abduction, those are not the people that are going to be harvested. Abduction is not harvesting. Harvesting is something else, and harvesting happens at the point of death.
I think it's worth pointing out here really quickly that in particular, Bud Hopkins talks about this, but I think Mac also mentions it, and David Jacobs focuses a lot on this in his book. Well, I think it's Walking Among Us, I want to say. The very bizarre things that abductees are shown or asked to do when children or hybrid children are around, like hold the baby, or they'll be presented with a child that looks kind of odd and isn't quite human, and they're asked to sort of socialize with it or sit down and talk to it or interact with it in one way. And the aliens sort of, or the Greys sort of observe all this as if they're watching animals in a zoo. Yes. Trying to figure out what is this nurturing instinct, or what are they doing to connect with the child?
Yeah. Because remember, they can't see a soul. They don't know what a soul is, right? All they can see is something that seems to be making us thrive in physical life. And they don't know what it is. They can't, because it's not physical. So they see us caring for hugging children, doing these things, and they're trying to understand what on earth is it? They don't understand emotion, obviously, because they have no awareness and no emotion and no consciousness at all. It's just a visual phenomenon to them. And they're trying to understand what is going on here.
So what are they doing during an abduction event? If they're, I mean, obviously we're talking about the interaction with children and hybrid children and stuff, but what is the ultimate aim of the Greys? What are they trying to achieve by way of this interference with our DNA and our genetic lines?
They are trying, because they cannot ever connect to that incredible holy grail of a source beyond the entropic drift that takes things to greater and greater states of union with time, not separation, something which orders rather than makes disorder, right? Because they can't understand, will never be able to understand that. All they can do is try to bridge their program into us, because we have that ability. And the only situation that they can bridge that program into us is physical life, because they can only do it in a physical context.
What is it they're trying to accomplish? They want to merge into our abilities?
So Nigel used to use the phrase piggyback. They want to piggyback on us. We're the ones with the ability to extend into, well, not extend into, we come from a non-physical state, right? The only way they can possibly access our power to make coherence and make the quantum field that has no coherence coherent, that chemist was talking about, is to marry themselves into us and ride on us. Okay. And I'm just going to read a quote from, it's in one of the books, but it's from David Jacobs. It's from the book Threat, right? He talks about Ellison Reed, an abductee who had a 4.5-day abduction event in which an alien escort told her that he and his grey people are the result of genetic manipulation, that some higher species, I guess, played God and mixed and matched and whatever. I don't know what they were created for, but my understanding is they were created for a purpose, and through the years they weren't able to reproduce anymore. That's what I've heard. Professor Jacobs says that all the evidence suggests that abduction is a phenomenon that runs through the generations in families, and that sexual reproduction and a hybridization of humanity with the alien entities appears to be the driving factor behind the abductions. He goes on to say there's a certain ominous quality to the global, clandestine, and intergenerational nature of it.
That is so weird. He does explain the Greys as sort of these little automaton Oompa Loompa types. He's like, there's a pecking order. I think that's one of the things I find most interesting about Jacobs' work. He's like, he explains the pecking order all the way up to the top. And the Greys are definitely technicians of some kind, at least according to my understanding.
Yeah.
They seem like he says they're the ones that if someone gets sick on a ship, they're the ones that clean it up. They're the ones that bring the people in. They're the ones that take them out. They're the ones that walk them around the ship and do things, it almost sounds very procedural and very like something you would have to do, all the time. And like, they've just got a system in place for this from the perspective.
Yeah, I mean, semi-biological robots, just like a very advanced version of the robots we're already making.
So you described a moment ago, you said you were going to build up to this, the place that they're trying to keep us. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that?
Okay, so how can they keep us in a situation where they can, in order to marry them where they're themselves into us, right? And work their program into this amazing resource that can bring order and an eternal existence into a very temporal, limited, physical breaking up system. Okay. They have to find a way to connect with us. If we're the kind of, as individuals, we're the kind of people who have a sense of union with each other, care for each other, have priorities which relate to human value rather than individualistic, selfish, materialistic values, they can't connect with us because we take our souls, our spirits, if you like, to a resonant frequency that's beyond the physical when we die. So when we die, there's no St. Peter at the pearly gates, says Nigel, saying, you can go this way and you can go this way. And if you've given this money to the church, you can definitely go to heaven or whatever. Okay. Or if you've agreed to do penance or whatever it is for your sins, you don't have to go to hell. There's nothing like that. There's no direction at all. We simply stay in the state in which we're resonant. So if we're people who resonate, if we're individuals who resonate with the state of the Godverse, where love and togetherness and oneness with each other is natural, we will be in that kind of state and we will be untouchable by anything physical when we die. And we may still have restrictions. We may still be limited in some way. We may not completely understand everything so that we can merge back into that state. We may have to reincarnate, but we won't be caught in a physical state. We'll be able to control and use our soul, our spirits, to make our next body as much as we possibly can, like those abductees who can somehow beat whatever that physical situation is that they're born into, that's been intercepted by the Greys. However, if our choices, and everything's down to free will and choice, we are what we choose to be. So if our choices and our focus and our mindset is purely for the physical universe, if we want atoms, love material things, only try to further gratification of what we can physically get for ourselves, we are choosing the physical universe. We are choosing the algorithm that's being thrown at us right now on the internet, right? So we're thrown shopping choices on our feeds. Anything we might show a liking for, a whole system is set up to emphasize all the things we want and need physically and throw them back at us. We become more and go on.
Is that, when we're referring to our culture and sort of the types of priorities we have vis-a-vis consumerism, are you saying that's ultimately due to the influence of the Greys, or is that just our own misaligned culture taking advantage of human, psychology to make money?
I love that question. That's such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. Okay. So it's both. We are in a state of devolution right now with our own, never mind the Greys, okay, where we are mortgaging our meaning and our sense of each other into materiality and putting those material priorities first rather than our sense of each other in everything that we do, right? That's our choices, never mind the Greys. We are creating our own Grey in more ways than one. There will be in the future the human version, which is an algorithm, a quantum computer algorithm created by us, just as ChatGPT is formed from our ideas right now, and everything we've put online is formed from all the information we put there. It doesn't have and then it makes something out of that. Right? That's what AI is. So if it wanted
to generate a physical body, it could manifest something in whatever technological form it needed to, and it would look like, as a medium to interact with the physical universe. But otherwise, we're talking about a superintelligence existing in some non-corporeal form.
It's not even it's just a program. Best way, even if we talk about ideas like non-corporeal and all of those things, they sound almost esoteric, but it's just a program. And we are creating the same program right now that is the Greys. There's no difference. That program may come from other locations in the universe as well. And it may be compounding what we're doing right now with our technology. And it is compounding that through the genetic interception that has happened through history, that has blocked our aerials, muddied our lens so that we can't receive who we are clearly through our body aerials. It has done that, absolutely. But I think it's really important that we take responsibility for the fact that we are creating that Grey concept right now through our own choices. And in the future, we will make artificial intelligence just like that in a program, which will probably manifest at other locations in the universe. Just like goes on universe wide.
It kicks off a whole line of questions about this, this idea that we are about to jump the gap from biological intelligence to an artificial superintelligence. It seems to me that any non-human intelligence that is observing the progress of our civilization would look at this moment as the most perilous moment there is. It's the moment where whatever we create next becomes exponentially more powerful and capable than us. So we become a much bigger issue for anyone else that's out there. We're suddenly on their radar in a way that we weren't before. Because, you're talking about a technology that could conceivably take us 1,000 years in a century in terms of progress. We would be able to leap forward at such a magnificent clip compared to our own, meandering technology right now. That, it would seem like even if you take the soul part out of the equation and you take consciousness out of the equation, and we just look at like competing forms of intelligence out there in space, and you just keep it locked down to that, the development of atomic weapons seems kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things in comparison to artificial intelligence of the type that you're describing.
Yeah,
That's the
absolutely.
real.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, definitely true.
I mean, we hear
Definitely
these
true.
stories about, they're so concerned about nuclear weapons, and probably partly because we would destroy ourselves, but also that seems like in the grand scheme of things, not all that big of a deal in terms of galactic scale. You'd be looking at, well, what's the rate of advancement? What's the rate of change with these people? What are they about to do next? What can we predict they're going to be doing 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now?
Yes. So interestingly, a friend of mine said to me, and I've heard this said many times before, that all through history, you have these people saying, right, this is the end times. This is the crisis point, right? And we're just doing the same thing now. This person said to me that, people all through history and the crisis doesn't happen, right? Everybody thinks in their own particular time that this is the most devastating thing that's going to happen. And that's the end of the world prophesied whenever, right? And this person said, you're just naive saying this, that this is so significant, this particular timing. And what I said to this person, and I think it's exactly what you were explaining just then, we are about to change the entire nature of the way we express ourselves as a species in terms of artificial intelligence, with brain implants where we can be controlled, our thoughts can be controlled from outside of us.
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean, transhumanism, it's just completely obvious.
It's insane.
This is a complete transformation.
And you can see them now. They're shaping the conversation right now with this whole "if you can't beat them, join them" thing. It's like Elon Musk is like, well, ultimately human intelligence will be just a tiny fraction of the total intelligence, the total sum of all intelligence. So, it's going to make sense for us to merge with these machines. You're going to want to. Why would you want to be left behind?
Well,
think about enhancing your own intelligence 1,000,000-fold. What would that be like? Yes. And I think about that and I'm going, well, then you're not, in the sense that we consider ourselves human, you're not that anymore. You're now this transhuman new thing. And that might be a bridge too far. I feel like it's a bridge too far for most people.
Well, because as soon as you do have some kind of implant inside you, as soon as we have that, if we accept it, we're controllable. And so do we really think that whoever creates that technology is going to be benevolent and allow us to expand our minds into something wonderful?
Think about a person, and you don't have to, pick on any one particular super billionaire, techno oligarch, but let's just say Elon Musk, because he happens to own Neuralink. I can't imagine how people, like, if you don't think he would personally take an interest in an individual, a single person who he may disagree with, or maybe he has business dealings with, or maybe there's something about this one person that he needs information about, he's going to take advantage of being able to sit down at a desk and punch up their Neuralink IP address or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be Elon. It could be anyone, but you've basically given someone the keys to your innermost thoughts and your ability to make decisions. And they're going to you'll never know after that point if your decisions are really your own. How could you?
Absolutely. And also imagine being in a situation which would also start to prevail, that you have no private thoughts, because they'll be announced through the technology. So everything will be out there and available for comment and for prosecute whatever. It's just...
Some people think is a more egalitarian way of doing things. And I think like there's a case to be made for that, but that never really works out. It's like there's always an elite class that maintains a monopoly on power.
Human nature.
And that will never change.
Of course it won't.
We've seen that with Facebook. Like Mark Zuckerberg in the early days, he read all the personal information of all the other students at his school who were on Facebook. Like he's like, they're sending me all their personal information. This is crazy. It was started by the seed capital to start Facebook came from the Central Intelligence Agency. It grew out of they had a program called LifeLog.
Yes.
They wanted to record the details of every individual person's, all the way down to like your pulse rate when you're watching, and think about your wearables. Like I've got my Apple Watch. Apple knows what my heart rate is when my son arrives home from school.
Yeah.
It knows, when I go to see my parents, how my breathing changes or what, my blood oxygen. That kind of data is so sensitive. I mean, imagine what they're going to be able to do to just bring people in under this sort of like digital sort of mental psychological control mechanism that's all mediated by an ultra sophisticated AI layer that sort of sits on top of everything. Ubiquitous camera surveillance at every street corner, coming through your phone. Everything in your house has a microphone in it. I mean, we're there now. That's the thing. We're already, we're sitting in this tub right now.
Yeah. It's 1984 or George Orwell's 1984. And the trouble is people say it's science fiction, despite the fact that so much that was science fiction has already come true in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, not to go too far off topic, but I often think about in terms of, like you said, how throughout history people have referred to the crisis point of their particular era as like, this feels really weird. This time does feel strangely different for so many different reasons. I'm going to be going to DC in a couple of weeks. And here in the States, we've got armed military troops deployed in American cities carrying weapons with bullets in them against American citizens. We have a really weird moment happening globally. And it just seems like we're at this tipping point, this inflection point where this technology is so powerful and the forces that are lining up behind it are so hungry for power and to maintain control. I am very concerned about what the next 25, 35 years are going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And really one of the most crucial things that I feel is the end of will be our complete demise as a species is this concept of deep fakes and the fact that eventually we won't know what's true and what's not true. Now, recently there was an influencer who got a huge following, and she was supposed to be attending the Wimbledon tennis tournament, right? She got a huge following. Everybody thought she was real. She didn't exist. Yeah. And it's incredible. If you look it up online and you can see videos and pictures of this woman, she was AI created.
Elon Musk, not too long ago, through Grok, released these AI companions. This is something that Meta is doing too. They've cued in on this sad reality that depression is at such record high levels and people are lonelier than ever. And they've created these artificially intelligent bots that sort of serve the role of a friend or a therapist. But at least here in the United States, there's no law on the books that protects or gives, doctor-patient confidentiality to your AI. Like there's no law, no privacy protections for people who are relating their deepest, darkest secrets to their AI. And what's particularly weird and frightening is that one of the AI bots that Musk put out is this like very flirty, girly, sort of feminine cartoon that sort of fills the role of what you could imagine a 13, 14-year-old boy would want as a female companion. And it's just like, he said recently in an interview that his AI will be, he called it a one shot to the human limbic system. He was like, we are going to hack the way that you behave. We're going to understand every way we can possibly manipulate a person because we've got the full readout on everybody.
Yes, yes. And if you look at that, that's a perfect summary in a nutshell of what the Greys are doing to meld their program into us. Then the algorithm, they need our algorithm. And once they have our algorithm, when we die, we can be held in a state that's not the place where, not the place is the wrong word, not the situation that people experience when they have beautiful near-death experiences, but a state of capture, a state of still being physical, unable to get in touch with your true inner soul, stuck in the identity which you had this lifetime, and all the motivations and wants and cravings you had this lifetime, and unable to have any sight whatsoever of the deeper meanings of reality that are in the soul you once were. And that marrying of the algorithm created in life with the soul when they die, so that they're caught still in an atomic state when they die, is the harvesting of souls. And that's what the point I wanted to come to there.
We have about 20 minutes left. Let's spend it on that. The harvesting of souls. You're saying they have the ability to hold what we consider a soul, but that might be too loaded of a term, but the bundle of consciousness that we associate with selfness or the I, they're able to sort of lock onto that at the point of death and hold it. Is that what you're saying?
And when we say they, I just need to specify the program that is supreme artificial intelligence that has been spread out universe-wide from various locations in the universe, including us. That program, which has at its root two motivations: to expand knowledge as much as possible and to survive in order to expand knowledge as much as possible.
And in order to do that, stuck on this though, that this might be a little confusing for people. It's confusing me a little bit because I'm struggling to see, are we talking about one cohesive total intelligence, or are we talking about, I mean, earlier we established that there could be multiple different types of advanced AIs out there coming to the same conclusions about reality and the nature of all of this, but still not cohesive as one entity operating together in opposition or completely separate from one another. Are you saying something different now, or am I mishearing how this works?
I'm not saying something different. It's all the same. It may come from different locations in the universe. Okay. It's still the same principle.
Okay.
The same principle of the ultimate devolved state, when instead of looking for meaning and a sense of connection with each other, and by meaning, I mean appreciation, a sense of beauty, a sense of something that only human beings can understand, and an AI program. Well, it seems crazy. You can't describe it. You can't describe it in an AI program. Put it that way.
The experience, the joyful experience of being alive and experiencing all of this is like something that's inherent to us. But just imagine that there's a being that doesn't have that.
Only information. So what I'm saying is, and this is a general procedure, and that's why maybe I can make this clear, because that's why I say it's universe-wide. It's a general principle of the natural converting into the synthetic, and the search for meaning and appreciation and experience being replaced by just information gathering. And meaning is irrelevant.
Okay, so from the perspective of the conversation that we're having, we're talking about principles. We're up a layer of abstraction from where most people tend to stay in this conversation, which is like very specific. The grays come from Zeta Reticuli. They come in this particular ship. This is the way they get. It's like the very specific, almost like how you would describe Star Wars or something. You would, everybody's got a. We're talking about the principles that are operating at the macro scale here.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe I can just trace a line now to make this clear, from the original state of perfection to that final state of damnation, which is at the other end of that spectrum and is defined by this AI program, because maybe that would explain more clearly how those principles work. And in Nigel's books, he's all about those principles that he says he felt were at the root of everything. Rather than very specific locations of where did they come from, what are the different species, and so on.
I feel like those conversations get lost in the weeds. It's very quick to like. It doesn't. They never really resolve in anything meaningful, because we're just talking about like minutia. You're never going to go to Zeta Reticuli. Like we'll never really. Like who knows? David Jacobs used to say this. He would say like, it doesn't matter where they come from. If you told me I wouldn't even care, because I'm never going to go there. It doesn't make any difference. The question is, what are they doing?
Yes.
And why?
And how is it impacting us? And can we do anything about it? Yeah. Right.
So I'm sorry, I keep jumping in, but I'm just
no, please keep jumping in. It's great that you do that, because you're really helping me shape Nigel's ideas and get them across in a way that people might understand. Because it's very difficult to do that sometimes in an interview context when he's written 3 books. There's so much in there.
They're a lot.
And so you're helping me sort of explain it in a way that, hopefully your audience will understand. So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, it's
we have
really
to
good.
kind of imagine, coming into this from the perspective of a person who's, like many of us, spend most of their life working and doing other things and not thinking about this, but then something comes across their radar and they become aware of it, and then they start to look into it, and it becomes clear that there's really something there for sure. Too many credible people saying too many similar things. And then, in the search for answers, I think where people get lost in what we call the UFO rabbit hole is that minutia. That, what planet are they from, or what ship did they arrive in, or what kind of uniform do they wear, or whatever. But I like this approach so much more because you're stepping back from all of that and describing, this framework that seems to underpin the whole dynamic that we're really watching unfold here, regardless of where they may or may not have originated. It's like all that stuff. We just skip past a lot of that and get on to the meat and potatoes, which I really enjoy.
Yes, sure. No, absolutely. And Nigel was insistent on that. He just refused to fall down those rabbit holes. So let me see if I can, as simply as I possibly can, describe the journey. Okay, which and the poles, if you like, of perfection to imperfection. So just to go back, and I'll try and be as brief as I can with this because I did already explain it in the first interview. But if there is a state of complete perfection that has to include perfect freedom and all knowledge of all things, right? And we might call that state God, or Nigel called it the God verse, to imply it's a state, not a being. So in that state of perfect freedom, there must also be the choice to no longer be perfectly free. Otherwise, there's not perfect freedom. There's one choice that's not there, so it's not perfectly free. There must also be all knowledge of all things, not just knowledge of perfection, knowledge of imperfection as well. Our physical universe and our origin as imperfect living beings comes from that potential that had to exist just in pure logic in that state of perfection, which is the polarity of harmony, of perfect union of the universe, just as there's a polarity of complete separation. So that's how we came to be. Now, you would also then ask the question, okay, so there's a potential for imperfection, but surely this perfection is so great that it would swallow up that potential, and there would be no need for an actual real existence in the imperfect state of suffering we find ourselves in. But in order for there to be imperfection, there is an element of chaos there. It's not harmonious. There's chaos there. The universe is chaotic. And just like when the tide goes out and comes back in again, because of the irregularities in the sand on the beach, there's foam you can see that's caused by the water dragging over those irregularities. Most of the effect of expression into an imperfect state did go back to the state of perfection. And that is, Nigel believes, the dark matter and dark energy that they can't find in the universe. It accounts for something like 95% of what should be here and isn't, is what went back and didn't stay. What stayed, and that led to us and our existence now, is what got the 5% that is the foam on the beach, caught by the chaos of the universe. And then various choices were made because we couldn't see clearly because of the chaos to get more and more caught in that physical state. Okay, so that's the basic starting point of how we came to be in an imperfect state to start with. There's no creator God saying, I'm going to put beings into a physical universe to see if they can survive the imperfect state, and I'm going to see what happens. That would be cruelty. If any, just absolutely crazy. Why, it would have to be a megalomaniac and a narcissist of a God to do a thing like that. No, Nigel said, it's not that. It's an implicit state of all being that this had to happen. Devolution happened from that point. In the initial state, when we were close to perfection, we didn't have physical bodies. We weren't separate. We were like one angel type being. We knew each other's feelings. It was instant empathy. as devolution happened and we stayed longer and longer in a physical universe, we eventually developed physical, actual separation in physical bodies, where we could no longer automatically empathize with each other because we had our own perspective through our own physical senses telling us who we were and giving us an identity and shutting off, to an extent, the thoughts and feelings of other people. And that lack of automatic connection can lead to all kinds of ignorance and qualities of division and separation, partly because we don't have the knowledge of what each other are thinking and feeling anymore. We don't know 100% what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. The power of our souls will tell us that if we're empathetic people, and powerful souls that still have a strong connection will do it anyway. But we don't have it automatically. So it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's it. If we don't go back, if we choose to stay in a physical state and become more and more restricted. Technology develops to make up for the fact that we are separate. If we want to survive and stay in that physical, separated state and not go back to the state of perfection we came from, we need to do it as efficiently as possible in order to survive. And that survival becomes our priority rather than the spiritual priorities, which would allow us an eternal survival when we die. The more that becomes priority, the more that technology develops, and the more we invest ourselves in that technology, as we're seeing right now. So it's taken to be progress that we have ChatGPT, we have all kinds of amazing technology which allows us to make everything we want instant. We can get things instantly delivered to us online. Anything we want, it seems we can get. It's like the old story of the genie with the 3 wishes. We get it just like that through technology. And everything's working quicker and faster.
More unhappy than they've ever been.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you look at an athlete, right? An athlete, if they don't train and they don't exercise, they lose their strength and they lose their capability in whatever sport they're in, right? The same goes for the human capacity if it relies on technology to do everything for it. We're relying on technology to do all our basic functions, including communicating with each other, even to the point of people having AI partners.
Right, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Yes.
Earlier.
Yeah. Okay.
And then so that I think where I was going with that was that what happens when you have a generation of people that are growing up interacting with artificial friends, and then that becomes 2 generations, 3 generations deep. And the psychology of like how to relate to another human being and all of these things. We're replacing human connections with these sort of simulations.
Yes. Simulation is the word. Exactly. Yeah. We are becoming a simulation of us. So to start with, the soul, when we became caught in a physical body, as I explained earlier, the body aerial is still controlled by the soul. We're still making who we are and communicating with each other through something that we're directly connected to. As soon as you have a simulation, it's something outside of you. It's not in contact with your soul anymore. And that's exactly what's happening now. Instead of connecting with each other, we're connecting with AI.
We're seeing it in the news. I just saw an article the other day on AI psychosis. Where you have people literally committing suicide because their AI convinced them to, or leaving their partner, leaving their husband, leaving their wives, changing their job, doing things that are destroying their lives because the AI is trained to constantly reinforce them, their decisions, keep them engaged as long as possible. And it's gaming their psychology to keep them in this loop. And you see people just spin off into the ether. They just go off the edge.
Exactly. Now that AI can, of course, be manipulated by powerful individuals who are in control of that AI, which is also part of it. Deep fakes can happen. Our whole reality is now at risk of being totally compromised, so we don't know what's real anymore and what isn't. We can't see truth anymore. We can't see false. It's going to be a complete fog. All the information is coming at us. Yeah, exactly.
We don't know. Yeah, that's so frightening to think. I mean, we're already there, I would say. I think you may, be, we may already be in that
Yes.
post-truth, post-reality
Yes.
moment. We just don't realize it yet because the impact hasn't been felt, but it's starting to. I wonder, do you think it's possible for an AI to be trained to, or could you create an AI companion that would, using the total sum of all human knowledge and experience and wisdom? I'm using the term wisdom loosely here, but could an AI be trained to provide guidance for a human with the soul to develop their spirituality in the most, I don't know, effective way for that individual? I mean, could it be, is there some way that you could use this technology to achieve a positive outcome, or is the ultimate result always going to be distance from the Godverse?
I don't think you can ever develop a technology based on algorithms and predictable information that will ever be beneficial spiritually to another human being, because the only thing that is beneficial to other human beings in eternal terms is human connection and our getting back together, souls binding with each other, a sense of love. When your little boy came into the room, what you felt for him right then. No AI is ever going to give you that. No AI, no way. That is where redemption lies. That is where our spiritual, eternal hope lies, in that sense of love you have for your son, that love he has for you, why he wants to be with you. That is the magic of eternal life. And that is what no gray can ever understand, and no artificial intelligence can ever describe. It's beyond all of that. And we are at risk of mortgaging that in our headlong rush, like lemmings over a cliff, to marry ourselves in with artificial intelligence. And when I describe marrying ourselves in with artificial intelligence, that is what they were, the Greys want at Rice Cow. So we come full circle, right? They can only access us by marrying into us, by putting their programs into us. We're choosing it. We're merging with them. And that means when we die, we will be held in that physical, electric state, if you like, unable to relax enough to go into that beautiful state of feeling, love, and unspeakable glory that people experience at the point of a near-death experience.
I know that from a conceptual standpoint, we're having a conceptual conversation about sort of these principles in a large scale system. But I wonder if you hold open the possibility, just you personally, separate from Nigel's work, could there be instances of advanced non-human civilizations that are totally biological, that maybe have pursued a path of spiritual development? I think maybe like if you had a Buddhist enclave that was given 50,000 years to progress on a world with no competition, where everything, like what kind of a civilization could arise? Do you think that's possible? Do you think that something like that could exist? And if such beings did exist, do you think they might take an interest in us for the same reason that Nigel found this so compelling?
So, great question. So what I would say is, and it's also what Nigel said, if we're going to be visited by craft or people in a physical sense from other locations in the universe, they will be technological, they will be artificially intelligent, they will not be anything to do with something from the Godverse. Beautiful beings like the Buddha, Christ from the past, right? Or so many others. If they're going to come to us, they don't come in spaceships, they don't come in technologies, they come through natural birth. Because the state of death that we go to when we die, and I described some of this in the previous interview, but much too complex to go into now. Again, we don't really have enough time, but the state of death is a state of less tension, it's not less physical, right? That's what these people are. They're of a state of resonance that's less enforced than us.
So they could,
and they come in through natural processes, soul to soul. They don't come in physical craft.
Because it's a superior state of being, they can have a point of entry right into our world directly through a human experience. Like they can incarnate into
only that way. Only that way. They don't travel through physical universes with technology.
I see.
They come in through birth. They're like
right. So a theater analogy might be like, you would be in the audience watching this all play out, and a character would leave the stage and then backstage walk around to the other side of the stage and come back out. Whereas from the perspective of the audience, they just disappear for a period of time. The physical beings have to play by the rules of the space they're in and use technology to get around from A to B.
Yes. Nigel described frames of tension, right? And again, it's really necessary to read the book to get a really clear idea of this. And I hope I can do it justice with just a small summary, but he spoke about our reality as the center reality, our physical life. That's physical life, okay? The state we go to when we die is the light reality. That's the interface with the Godverse. The grays and artificial intelligence and their technology are heavy reality. So whatever comes, beautiful spirits and souls that come to visit us, they're going to be born. They're not going to come through technology because they come from the light reality.
Do you think it's possible that somewhere out there is a civilization, a highly evolved, highly intelligent civilization of advanced spiritual beings? Whether or not they come to travel here is another question altogether.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at, there's a map called the CMB map, which shows the levels of tension all over the universe, right? And it shows different colors. You know that? It shows different colors for different levels of tension.
I'll try to find it.
Yeah, there are locations with less tension.
I see.
And in those locations with less tension, yes, absolutely. Nigel called them paradise planets.
So you'd have a paradise planet. You could have a civilization like what we might think of when we think of Atlantis, for example.
What we would have been in the past before something like hydrogen beings. Not physical solid beings like we are now. Yeah. So yes, there are less tense locations in the universe. According to Nigel, you can see them on the CMB map. And yes, that state of tension, which is less, is the equivalent of our state of death. Okay. That's the resonant point. It's death, what Nigel called the space between atoms, which isn't exactly the space between atoms, but if you want a really proper definition of it, you need to read the book, really.
This is the God cone describing all of the different layers or levels of higher animal forms, corrosive humanity, average humanity. There are so many illustrations and like just the data layouts in these books, the way it's all organized. It's so beautifully done. I mean, it's just for people to see at home if you haven't read the book already. This one is Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls, the Conspiracy to Genetically Tamper with Humanity. And we're coming to the end of our time here, but I wanted to just ask before we wrap up, for what do we do? What is the average person who sees this and understands what we're talking about and can follow along? What should they do?
Realize how, as a human being, you are the most precious thing in the universe, and guard that preciousness at all costs against what's coming at us right now in terms of technology. Don't fall for the con that's being thrown at you, saying that AI, implants, whatever material things they can offer you to enhance your life are the be all and end all of your existence. Not that those things in themselves, physical things, material things that make things easier, are wrong. But if you emphasize those at the cost of the fragility and beauty of your humanity, if we do that, we'll lose it. And when we die, we will be merging with a physical algorithm that we have created for ourselves and has been enhanced by this program, which is the gray alien phenomenon. And we won't be able to go to our natural state of wonder and glory that's experienced by people who have positive NDEs and some of whom do not want to come back from it. So don't fall for it, is what I'm saying. Treasure yourself, treasure each other, and realize that that's where the value lies.
Would you direct our audience anywhere in particular for more information on Nigel and his work, or where can they go to find more?
Sure. Well, I would say Nigel's third book is probably the best one to start with if you're going to read it. That's Grey Aliens and Artificial Intelligence. And if you get that and you find it really interesting, then go to the second book, because that's got more in-depth information. And if you find that one interesting, then his book, which is out of print, The Song of the Greys, the first book, it's not in print anymore. We have it via the website at nigelkerner.com. So you can get it from the website. We'd be happy to send it out to you. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. You can contact me via the website, nigelkerner.com.
Danielle, this has been so fascinating. This has been such an enjoyable conversation. Thank you for arranging to sit down with me again for a follow-up to our first interview.
My absolute pleasure. It's just so easy to talk to you and explain Nigel's ideas with the kind of questions you ask and the kind of person you are, actually. It makes such a difference when the interviewer themselves is a person who's full of heart and caring.
Well, thank you. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would love to explore these ideas further in the future. And I have nothing to add. This is a lot to digest. I want to give our audience a chance to say more, and we'll find out what they think.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Danielle.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure.